All right, welcome to another episode of The More You Know. Today, I'm joined with Dr. Alan Snyder. Dr. Alan, can you give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your show today, Brian. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation. My name's Alan. I know technically I'm a doctor. I have a doctorate in physical therapy, which used to be this sweatpants type of profession, with a collared shirt. And over the years, it progressed to a master's. And then when I went to physical therapy school, it was a clinical doctorate. So technically, I'm Dr. Allen, but I'm not that pretentious. I'm more about just Allen. And that's kind of how I roll. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, did all my schooling there, worked there for about a year, and then I realized I got to get out of here. So I moved up to New York City, New York, about 11 years ago. And I've been here pretty much in that area, working in different practices, outpatient, hospital, home care. Now I run my own small practice based on orthopedics. So that's the general story of my profession. Personally, I'm a personality. I play sports, I go out, I'm into a little bit of everything. I try to be not too serious about life, and I think putting a smile on people's faces is what I really strive for.
Hey, I love that way of living. I think that life shouldn't be so serious itself. That you should just take it easy. Smile a lot and make other people happy, and then their happiness really radiates on to you.
It's the
But
truth. What's the expression? It takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. I tell you, man, like 2020, 2019, the last couple years, everybody is so triggered about everything. And it's like, we just need to calm down, take it easy, be nice to everybody. And it's contagious. It's more contagious than COVID, just helping your fellow brother. And it's not a religious based thing, but we need to be better in this world. And it's going to make a better life for everybody around us.
yeah, definitely, and especially like with politics and everything, it's just fighting here and there, and I think like I don't know why people argue with politics. Like you're not going to change the other person's mind. Like you might as well spend that time talking about something else that's more productive and can make each other laugh and smile.
I'm with you. I don't get it because personally, I'm a centrist. I'm not really that big into politics. I grew up in a divided household where my dad voted one way and my mom voted the other. But I know people where it just takes up so much space in their head. And, in my PT practice, I have people who come in and I say, "Hey, Miss Smith, how was your weekend?" And they tell me it was terrible. I said, "Well, what happened?" They go, "Well, he's still breathing." And I'm like, "Oh my God,
Oh
like that
wow.
is a." I mean, I'm on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which tends to be a little bit more liberal up here. But you're right. You're never going to convince anybody because there's great points on both sides. And, I played sports my whole life. Have you ever seen a sports game where the player argues with the ref and then the ref goes, "You know what? You're right. I'm going to reverse my call." It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually like that example that you just brought up. Like I never really thought of it cuz like you see like LeBron James or like some football player arguing with the ref and the ref is just staring forward, not even paying attention. It's not even changing their like way of thinking. And that's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, basketball, you tend to get a little bit more makeup calls if we're going down the route of sports, but you just can't change people's minds. And I do think that you have such good points to be made on both sides. Look, you cannot be an all or nothing type of person. I have patients who love the right wing and they're going to pick out some of the highlights because Republican's not a dirty word. There are points to be had on the right. And then I have people who think the left wing is the best way to go. And there's so many good things about that. And very rarely do you find two people that can't agree on anything. But if you feel 90% strongly one way, it's just going to dominate the conversation. And I don't argue. I feel like there's so many other things in this world to talk about and go on. It's just not something I ever get into?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally 100% agree with that. But you said that you were born and raised in Baltimore. What inspired you to kind of move out of your home state?
Yeah, I did all my schooling there. Whether it was my high school, obviously, I come from a town called Owings Mills, Maryland. It's near Towson, which is a bigger city there. And then I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, go Terps. freshman year, national champions in basketball. We went to the Orange Bowl in football. And then I went to the University of Maryland in Baltimore for my doctorate in PT, which was further away, but I'm now living, raised, grown up in the same area. And I just felt like a townie, Brian. Like I would go to dinner and you just run into your caseload. Or I would have patients that would come in and they would start talking to me, and next you know, it's like, oh, I went to high school with your mother. You just Baltimore is a big place, but it's really not, because like-minded people, people with similar interests, tend to go to the same places. And next thing you know, it just was too much for me, and I said I got to get out of here. And I had a lot of friends from college who lived in the New York City area. I had my college girlfriend lived up here, and I just felt like I got to get out of here. And of all the places you're gonna move to, New York is one of the better places.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Me myself, I'm born and raised in Michigan, and I completely felt the same way. Cause like whenever like I would go home to my hometown, I just see the same people, and like going to the grocery store, you can barely like go there and you always see someone that you know. And for me, I like the change of scenery, so I'm down here in Georgia now. It's a good
Okay.
experience because like you get to see other ways of living, like so much different experiences out there. And for you, I'm actually jealous. Like New York sounds great, but for me, I don't think I could ever say goodbye to a car than use public transportation.
But it's different. Again, in Baltimore, you don't take the public buses, and taking the public subway there is, you're on your own risk there. In New York City, it is amazing. It is much quicker, in fact, to take a subway to get somewhere. And it's so many trains and so many people, but once you know where you're going, it's amazing. The worst part of New York City is the parking and the traffic. So the first thing you got to do is get rid of your car, because you do not want to be being held hostage to alternate side parking or paying for a garage and the tolls. And don't get me started on the cost of gas in the city if that's all you're looking for, because it's about $1 to $2 more per gallon.
Yeah, my sisters live in New York, and whenever I would go visit them, like it's always so fun going to New York because there's so much to do. But usually they pay for my transportation, which is kind of nice. But except like the Uber rides from the airport to their place, that's kind of on me. But when it comes to like the subway, they got me, which is nice. And it's just I just feel like it's a good place to live where when you're like young, really.
Absolutely. I say you rent space here, but I think you also rent time. New York City, in my opinion, is great when you're in your 20s, and it's great when you're in your 70s. And I see that in my small practice, where I never thought that a 70-year-old woman would be the type of patient that I would identify with the most. They come in and all they want to talk about is dating and movies and travel and food. And it's like we live the same life, because I'm 37 this year, and a lot of my friends have already moved to the suburbs. They have kids. They've really settled down and bought the house that they're going to live in the next 30 years, while I've taken my time and enjoyed my life a lot more. And I would never trade those experiences, but at the same time, my time is coming to an end probably next year. And that was before 2020. I was already talking about kind of being done with New York. And New York is great, but I don't know where your sisters live, but I can't imagine that they were in more than a tiny two-bedroom apartment type of deal.
Oh man, they're in Brooklyn now, but beforehand I forgot where they lived before, but I remember when I was in college and I went to New York to interview, and I went to go visit them. Oh my god, they had like a four-person apartment, so small, so small. I was like, I could not do this.
Not to
I could
mention the
not.
cost. I mean, I had my family come up to my first apartment in the city, which was right outside the Empire State Building, and they said, where's the tour? And I'm like, you're looking at it, man. You can touch 2 to 3 walls at any given time in any Manhattan apartment, and the scary thing is it's so much more expensive than anybody's mortgage back home. My uncle was like, your rent is twice as much as my mortgage, and I have a house. And that's the trade-off. At the same time, you can move to Boise, Idaho and get a mansion for nothing. But when you're in the city, you are never at home. I live in a tiny apartment now. I'm never here usually. you're out, you're about, you're traveling, you're going, you're doing, and it's just a means to an end as far as where you can put your head at the end of the night. Unfortunately, this last year, it's not been like that. And you're finding a lot of people in the city are just sitting around looking at those walls and getting a little mashugana, if you will.
Since you kind of moved out of your home state, how would you say that you've developed yourself as a person? How would you say that you've really grown since moving out and exploring somewhere new?
Yeah, Brian, that's a really good question because it doesn't really come up that often. I personally identify as an introvert. And as anybody that will ever talk to you in my friend group, they would think I'm crazy for even saying that because they think I'm one of the most extroverted people. I have this big personality. I'm always talking. I grew up relatively shy. And when I am at home in Baltimore and when I go out and I kind of feel very reserved, I wasn't the king of the high school prom. I had friends. I did my thing. But I moved to New York City, and when you have the anonymity of being in a city like this, you'll never see the same person again. I mean, very rarely do you run into anybody for good or bad circumstances. I had an altercation the other day in a restaurant where there was a guy just looking for problems, and I was just trying to make peace between it, and then he wanted to make a problem with me. And sure enough, I'm just sitting there like, this is really weird, but in the back of my head, I know I will never see this guy ever again. We're just never going to cross paths. So coming to Manhattan, you get a chance to start over. And for me, this is such a dorky story. I've only told this a couple times. I came here my first summer. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was working. I was playing hockey. And I would just go to bed every night and watch a movie. This is way before Netflix was that popular. And one of the movies I remember watching was that one with Jim Carrey and I think Zooey Deschanel. It's called Yes Man. Did you ever see that?
I have.
The principle of this movie, it changed my life, and it's a really weird thing to say, but Jim Carrey was one of those very reserved, calculated people, and then of course his life kind of changes, and he meets this girl who's like, you just need to start saying yes. You need to actually no, he saw that like a fortune or something like that, and then he met her, and he noticed that in her, and from that point on, he just started saying yes to everything, and in the last 11, 12 years since I've been here, my whole life and my whole outlook has changed because I went from, I don't know, it's just easier to stay home to, the expression to shoot your shot? Like, I shoot my shot on everything. And it's not even just putting myself out there, whether it's like dating or anything, because any opportunity that's going to happen, I'm going to try to take advantage of it. I'm going to go do it. And then if you don't like it, you can say you didn't. You don't have to do it anymore. But that movie really changed me. And it's just such a great question you asked because I embrace that philosophy, and I would say anybody who's listening, the answers are never going to jump and hit you in the face, whether it's mental health or physical health. You got to go out there and do it. It's like raising a kid. You throw as much at the kid as possible, and you see what sticks. I don't have any kids, but that's how I understand it to be. I just know for me, I heard on a podcast one time, it was about mental health, and they were saying, whatever you're interested in is not going to just all of a sudden appear. There's not some sport, there's not some hobby that's out there that you've never heard of, but it turns out that's your favorite thing to do in the world. But the truth is there's a lot of stuff out there that, quote, doesn't suck. So trying to find something that you think, this won't be the best thing, but it won't suck. And you end up finding these experiences and people and friends, and that's how I've been living my life, and it's just really, really changed and molded me as a person.
Yeah, I definitely love that. I can't tell you how many times I've told myself that, all right, one day, this day of the week, I'm just going to say yes to everything that someone asks me, which...
Do you do it, though?
It kind of depends, because, whenever, I do, set that, and someone says some crazy stuff, I'm just like, I don't know. But I think that once you as long as you keep an open mind to something and you at least hear something out, I think that's all that you really need to do is just hear something out, and then it's kind of why I like doing this style of podcast, because I have so many people from different backgrounds come on to the show, and they just tell me about their experiences, what they're passionate about, and some of the stuff that I never even knew that was even a thing. So having them teach it to me firsthand gets me curious, and that gets me to kind of look it up and then try it out for myself, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I cater in my office because I work one-on-one with my patients, and I usually just ask them, what do you want to listen to? And they're like, no, 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 just put on whatever you want. And then I generally try to figure out what they hate the most. So, if it's like a young kid, I'll put on some country. If it's an older person, I'll put on some gangster rap until they give me an answer and they go, all right, I like Frank Sinatra, or just picking somebody. I have learned so much from people, just musically, because I never listened to Etta James or Lena Horne or any of these old style singers. And when somebody requests to listen to that, and the truth is if it's ever really bad, maybe I'll say, I don't really love this. But the most part is I turn to them and I will say thank you. I was like, this is really cool. I never heard this singer before, and now I know them, and my repertoire of music of what I've heard grows more and more. And I always thought, like, with a patient or when you're meeting a new person, for me, it's much better to meet somebody who you don't connect with, because it's an opportunity to learn. And while I may not care too much about what their passion is, so to speak, I still have so many questions. Like, I went on a terrible date years ago with a girl who did fencing. And I gotta be honest, I knew nothing about fencing, and to this day, I don't remember so much of it. But for that night, I learned a ton about it. Why they keep their hand behind their back, why they try to score this way. I thought it was fascinating. I mean, it wasn't love at first sight, but I knew I was going to make the best of the situation. I think that's a better way of looking at things.
Yeah, definitely. Just keep a curious mind, and even if you don't connect with someone at the first moment, like, you have to embrace like the awkward silences at first, because you're both you're both in a situation where like you both feel weird. So that's when you just crack at each other and break the shell that is around you guys, and then just talk, and then you'll find commonalities as you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's common ground. If you're just talking about conversation, it's funny because I'm a sports fan, and let's just know that fan is short for fanatic. People forget that sometimes. They think, like, oh, you're a sports fan. I'm uncomfortable telling you how much sports I watch. Like, I'm just not going to do it. You're going to judge me. It's going to get really weird. But the truth is, I love sports. And if I had my way, I would talk sports all day, every day to people. The truth is, most people that I see don't care. So for me, I need to find other stuff that they do care about. Some of my people love the stock market. Other people want to talk politics. And you just have to go along for the ride and try to learn something.
Yeah, honestly, for me, I was never really into politics. For me, I'm more into technology, stocks, finance, all that stuff. But politics is something that I've never really been involved in much. But with this recent election, I just see it everywhere. So I just was like, okay, this
But
year,
it's great. It's
this
been the
this
best
year,
comedy ever.
I'll
Yes,
learn about
absolutely.
it and see what everyone's like cracking jokes at. And once I was able to kind of read up on stuff, I'm able to understand it more, and
Well,
it's just
it's like anything though, where like stocks, I think is the same thing. Is when you don't know anything about politics or finance, you realize, oh my God, there's so much I have to learn, and then you start learning about it, and then when you know enough, you realize, you know what, it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't matter. I mean, this this past year was ridiculous. I couldn't take it so seriously. Look, living in New York City, everybody here feels very passionately one way. So I was watching those debates literally with popcorn. I said, this is going to be high entertainment, and I was very
oh, it
much pleased.
was. Oh
It was
yes,
great.
yes.
It was absolutely great. It was just ridiculous, and the stuff that people say back and forth. And a part of me tried to follow this all more because it's what people want to know about. But the other part was I'm into entertainment, kind of like we started off this conversation. It's all about having laughs and having fun. And, that's what I want to live my life by. And it's so great, man. I'm actually kind of bummed. I just watched SNL recently, and it's basically the first episode since the election that they just didn't even talk about the election. There was nothing, no skit, a cold open. I mean, they did a little bit, and I was like, oh man, this is not as good as it used to be.
And aside from all from like laughing and smiling to make you feel good, a lot of it is on health. Having the medical background that you have right now, what are some ways that you're keeping healthy?
I have to be honest, I have not been the best in 2020 by keeping healthy. It's been hard. When I first shut down back in March, I was doing midnight mozzarella sticks. I mean, my whole work schedule got shifted, my life got shifted. But then as the weather got nicer, I made a point to go out and get vitamin D from the sun. I made a point to run or to walk or to move. And whether it's you just can't lie in bed all day. It's not good for your back. It's not good for your posture. It's not good for your heart. I try to be good, and I really need to do a much better job of it. Just exercising. It is one of those things where everything that goes on, I mean, I'm not going to talk about COVID and vaccines and what you need to do to take care of yourself, or mask or non-mask, but the truth is if we all exercised a little bit and just took care of the insides, I was doing that back in February and March. I was worried I might get sick, and I said I better get my lungs and heart as strong as possible. And then I did get sick. I actually got sick, and I was down and out for 2 days. 102-degree fever, couldn't get out of bed. Then I was a little lethargic for a little bit, and then a couple of days later, I was feeling back to normal. I don't know how much my preparation for that helped or not. I mean, I'm young, I'm relatively healthy, but it's really tough. And I had somebody today tell me they went online to try to buy weights. You can't find weights online right now. They
Oh
are
man,
sold out everywhere.
trying to find weights when the pandemic first started was torture. I checked every single website and everything was out. It was insane. That's that.
I don't think it's gotten any better, though.
Yeah, and it still hasn't gotten any better. It's still hard to find weights, and then you just gotta get creative with it. Then
Yeah, body weight stuff is always really good. It takes zero room to do a squat, to do a push up, to do a sit up. And we had mentioned something about the Spartan race. Have you ever done a Spartan race before?
I've not honestly. I've told myself that I really want to do one, and I told myself that I would prep for one soon. But I like it just seems so intense.
It is definitely very intense, and I guess I can tell you more. But when you do an obstacle at the Spartan race, and the Spartan races, there's all different types. There's the outdoors ones that are 3 miles, and then 10 miles, and 14 miles, and they also have a stadium series where that's really cool because I did that at Citi Field where the New York Mets play, and you go up and down and in the dugout in the locker room. I mean, it's really cool, but it's completely different. You're not getting covered in mud the way you kind of want that picture to look like at the end. Here's the thing with Spartan races, when you fail an obstacle, you have to do 25 burpees. Do
Oh
you know
god.
what a burpee is?
Oh man, that brings me back to like football season. Oh my god.
Right. So, and this is kind of getting back to as far as what you can do for yourself. A burpee, for anybody listening that doesn't know, is basically you're supposed to jump into the air, and then you put your hands down on the ground, you shoot your legs out, you do a push up, and then you stand back up, and that counts as one. Do that 25 times and let me know how you're doing, because after about 5 to 10, you're gonna be like, man, this is rough. But that exercise, not only 25 is a penalty at a Spartan race, but that exercise was created by prisoners. That was meant to be an exercise for your total body that you could literally do in a jail cell. And I hope that your home is nicer than mine is, but my New York City apartment is about the size of a jail cell, pretty much. So when you say things that people can do for themselves, there's a million YouTube videos out there. There's Instagram and TikTok. There's so many exercises that you can do, but it's kind of like you were saying. It's all about getting started. Do something. My mom just had a knee replacement. She couldn't walk at all, and I went home to take care of her, and I said, let's just walk 10 feet. And she walked 10 feet, and then we did 15 feet, and then 20. And then before you know it, after a couple of days, what used to be hard becomes easier. And that is always the most important piece of advice I could ever give for anybody is, it's always couch to 5K or couch to 26.2 for a marathon. You're not going to start this massive journey on anything on day one. But if you just do a little bit on day one, and even if you can't increase it for a week, just keep doing the same amount, I guarantee you will get better and make improvements. It's impossible to fail.
Yeah, and this kind of brings me to kind of like the analogy of like how you're describing this is I would imagine this is how like physical therapy is for people. People who want to get into working out, like it's hard for them to start. And someone going through physical therapy, like it's hard for them to do anything at first.
It's so hard. I mean, I have patients that come in and fail on their first day. Usually we're talking somebody like post-op, right? Because they had a hip replacement, a knee replacement, and they just can't lift their leg. They can't do this. And I say, if I know the person is mentally strong enough, I will tell them, remember today, because this is okay. we're going to keep doing this, and I promise you, in 3 weeks' time, you won't even remember how much you struggle. And, they look at you with this suspect eye, but the truth is 3 weeks later, I look at them, and where somebody couldn't lift their leg in the air, now they're doing it with 3-pound weights. And I look at them, and I say, do you remember when you struggled? They're like, yeah, I do. This is awesome. And there's no sweeter feeling as a therapist.
Yeah, so kind of building on top of that, like I know some of my friends from like football injuries or just working out injuries, they had to get like if they tear their ACL, like it's hard for them to walk in the beginning. And I know that from seeing videos and some stuff on TV, that it can get really discouraging. I feel like for people who just start, how do you keep them? How do you keep their spirits high in these situations? Like the first week when they're struggling to walk 1 feet, and then they just have these thoughts in their head that is just are you serious? I could do this. This is like natural functions, and I can't do this. How do you kind of nurture them in these types of situations?
I mean, I'm a comforting guy. So for me, I'm always going to be reassuring and tell them, you're going to get through this. I'm going to get you through this. I promise. Because I've done this before. At this point, Brian, I've seen so many knee surgeries. I worked at a hospital every Saturday that specialized in hip and knee replacements. I've seen so many knees that it's probably in the thousands at this point, and I can almost tell you within a week's time, here's what we're looking for. Your knee's going to bend this much today, and then next week it's going to be this much, and then this much. And when you tell somebody about these little goals and about these little wins, they see it happen and they trust you. And there's a lot of trust that goes into the doctor-patient relationship. But as they come in and I make them feel better, because I do a lot of hands-on work and we do a lot of stretching. And as they start to notice things feel better, and then they notice they're getting better, you pick up steam and you pick up momentum. The weird thing with most people is everybody kind of knows somebody who's been through it, and you've heard of an ACL surgery. You've heard of any injury you can come up with. You know that somebody has gone through it before and they're doing better. So you almost kind of know if you just put in the work, you're going to get better. So there's this whole system of now I just have to go to therapy. Now I'm going to go do this. And patients know this and they know what's going to happen. But going through it is completely different because you got to put the work in too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of I feel like it's just that notion of like having someone that believes in you, having someone that's there by your side, is what really keeps people up. And for me, I think the best way for people to get started to do anything in life, really, well, especially for like exercising and working out, is to get into like a group environment, or pair up with someone to kind of like hold you accountable, as I assume that you do with your patients.
I try to. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. To be held accountable is so important. You know, I started training kickboxing about 6 years ago, and you go to these classes, and when you have other people around you that are training really hard, it's hard not to pick up your level. I'm that guy at the gym on a treadmill, and somebody gets on the treadmill next to me, and they're running just a little bit faster. Sometimes I just kind of, boop, 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 make sure I'm going a little bit faster. And I always had these dreams of one day winning the lottery, and I'm going to have this massive house, and I'm going to make this awesome gym. And right now in my building, we have a gym that's relatively empty. And I go down there some days by myself, and there's just no energy. It's really kind of strange because you'd think like you have the gym, the whole thing to yourself. I say, I'm going to go down there and do an hour's workout. And around minute 35, I'm like, I don't really feel like doing this anymore. Let me just go back upstairs and watch, another episode of Fargo or something. But when you go to a class, when you're with somebody, there's no other option. When I was training kickboxing, the class is an hour, and there is no wimping out. You don't just say, okay, I'm going to head out now. If you have something where to be, they'll be nice about it. But being held accountable by an instructor, by a training partner, by a friend is so important. And I was working out with a friend once a week, once every other week this summer. But even then, it's just not the same. You really need to take it inside. It has to come from your own. Do you ever heard the expression the invisible hand? It's what gets you up in the morning? What is pushing you out of bed? What is it? Money? Is it a degree? Is it fun? Something has to motivate you, but it has to come from within. It really does, because I tell you, dude, there's pills out there that are magic pills. Any infomercial you've ever seen, it's all BS. There is a magic pill out there. It's called hard work and dedication. So any sugar pill you want to take, if you're willing to put in the hard work and dedication, you will get better and you will make improvements.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. Definitely do agree with that. You said that you worked with athletes before. Are you able to give examples, or is there
Yeah,
some
I mean, there's
confidentiality with that?
yeah, I'm not supposed to say too much about anything, but just
Gotcha.
the long and short is when I was in downtown Baltimore and the Baltimore Orioles, which is the local baseball team, when they went out of town, anybody that was on the disabled list would basically have to go to physical therapy for PT. That was their job that day. And we had all different people come in. Nobody super special other than one guy who, you can look it up, but he was a center fielder, star player who took a ball off of his foot and broke his foot in Yankee Stadium years
Oh
ago.
God,
And,
that sounds horrible.
oh, it
Oh,
happens all the time.
I'm feeling my legs hurt right now.
It happens a lot. Have you seen these players these days when they play baseball and they go up there like they're in full body armor?
It's
Because
so
anytime
scary.
a ball goes into an elbow, into their head, into their knee, they break bones. And that play that I'm talking about, where you're a right-handed batter and you swing and the ball goes straight down and into your foot, it'll break a bone very easily.
I give them props too, because whenever I do see like them hit each other with like a baseball, like they just shake it off, and I'm like, oh my God, I would be screaming so loud.
Yeah. The best. Did you ever see that movie Major League Two, where who is it? Corbin Burnson plays the third baseman Roger Dorn, and they tell him, we really this pitcher, he pitches inside, so you need to crowd the plate and just take one for the team because we need a base runner. And the pitcher goes back and throws it, and he turns around and he gets hit, and he just makes a sound of like, and you're thinking like, I would be in tears. It's just saying, I was saying before, like I'm a big fan of MMA and kickboxing. I watch these fights every week where these guys are pounding on each other's faces and do not even flinch. Meanwhile, if you take your own knuckle and just tap your cheekbone super lightly, it really freaking hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see these guys, they don't even flinch.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's crazy that people can just have such a big pain tolerance that they can just take all of these hits.
It's just mental. It's just one of those things like anybody who gets to those levels, they've experienced it before. And, I always equate it to, say, a comedian who's performing in Madison Square Garden. If you or I right now, your podcast, we want you to host a live version at Madison Square Garden, and they put you in the middle of that arena and they fill it. I don't know about you, dude, but I would be shaking. I would be so nervous. And even though you're just doing a live performance of something you've done a ton of times, it's not the same. But when you start off by doing it for 10 people, then for 20 people, then for 100, then 1,000, you're just kind of increasing it in a much smaller way. And I think when it comes to being a professional, a musician, a comedian, an actor, you've experienced all that stuff. And in sports, you've played in front of crowds before, and it's just doing it over and over. Maybe the first time you're nervous, but then it becomes like second nature to you.
Yeah, yeah. It's just all that repetition, repetition.
It's so true. It's one of those, how many people have ever been overnight successes, and you think it's like that, but you have no idea. And
Oh, it's nothing like that.
you want it to be. You
I
want
wish.
people. Yeah, you're hoping right now that somebody goes, man, that Brian is a great interviewer. Joe Rogan's going on vacation for a week. Why don't we have him come in here and fill the shoes? You're like, oh yeah, that would be awesome. But the truth is even somebody like that, it's been 10 years of hard work. And I'm a big comedy fan, and I read something online the other day, and Bill Burr, I don't know if you know, he hosted SNL earlier
I
this year.
love Bill Burr.
Bill Burr's great. Bill Burr filmed his first comedy special at age 40 and was flat broke for 20 years leading up to that. And that is just a hard pill to really swallow. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't take that type of punishment. I mean, 20 years of something and just never really getting anywhere, that is brutal.
Yeah. Even like a month without any progress is brutal to me, and like I couldn't imagine. Bill Burr is a really funny guy, though. I first really heard of him when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I was like, "This man's hilarious. I love it. I love it."
He is great. You know, his old comedy specials, and you know, he hosted SNL this year. And if you want to see something really funny, I don't know if you ever saw, but he did a performance in Philadelphia. This might be like 15 years ago. And he goes out and he starts telling some jokes, and I forget the exact story. I think maybe the person right before him bombed or something, and the audience was just not having it. And he goes up there and tries his act, and people are booing him and talking, and he just explodes. And he goes on this like 12-minute rant about why Philadelphia is so bad, and it turned into one of the most legendary viral videos for him and helped his career explode because he's just roasting them for the Liberty Bell and their cheesesteaks and Rocky, and they ate it up. It was so funny.
Yeah, I definitely do need to check that out. But the last topic that I wanted to touch upon is being a physical therapist. I feel like you see a lot of postures that are not the greatest.
Oh my god.
and with stuff being and with the environment today, a lot of people are working from home, or just people in general don't really sit with good posture. What are some ways that you can really fix your posture so you don't uh, end up at a later age with a horrible spine?
I mean, it is crazy. The numbers are something like 80% of people in this world will miss at least one day of work due to lower back pain. And like that is a ridiculous number. You know, riding the subway, you see people with the cell phones. Everybody has a cell phone now. We all use it. We're all texting. We're all on the gram and TikToking and whatnot. I personally don't have the best neck. And when I sit and lean forward and look at my phone all day, every day, I will go to bed with a heating pad on my neck. It's something that I tell my patients, you need to be obsessive about your posture. Your head should be on top of your shoulders. Your ear should line up with your shoulder should line up with your hips should make a right angle with your knees. So if you're sitting too high, sitting too low, that comfortable chair, if you're sagging into it, that is terrible. I don't know about you, but if you ever sit in bed and you're watching TV for a while and you just sag and sag and sag, and then you go to stand up and you're like, oh my God, my back is sore. I mean, that is not good. Being aware of your posture, whether it's putting a pillow behind your back, something behind your neck, just thinking, is my head up right now or am I leaning forward? And you know, your head weighs about 8 pounds, you know, the famous Jerry Maguire line from The Little Kid. Every inch forward that your head is, your ear over your collarbone, which you can probably get at about 4 inches more, ends up multiplying, or adding another 8 pounds of pressure that the back of your neck is having to hold up. So I always say, like, you know, imagine it's a bunch of people, your muscles in the back of your neck are a bunch of construction workers who are holding a rope that's preventing your head from falling off. The further your head goes, it adds more and more and more pressure that those muscles at the end of the day are just sore and tired and it hurts. Same thing's true with your lower back, and you got to take care of your lower back. You have to make sure you're stretching the muscles in your legs. You have to make sure that you're keeping your core tight. Being aware of posture. That's something that every patient hears from me if I see them slouching or see their neck leaning forward.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people like it's just comfortable not sitting straight. How should people really get over that hump of like uh when they're sitting up straight it might feel uncomfortable at first? Like how would you suggest like things that help with
Well,
that?
look, I kind of mentioned, you know, if you have a pillow behind your back, you know, I have a nice comfortable chair here that I'm sitting in, but have you ever seen those big business office chairs? They're big and they're cushy. You got to have lumbar support. That comfortable couch that you think is so comfortable, well, after years of sitting on it, those cushions wear out and your tush just kind of slides right in, and you can just feel your back opening up and not in a good way. Especially as a younger person, those discs that you have that separate your vertebrae, we call them, you know, jelly donuts, meaning the more pressure you put on the front side of the donut, it's going to cause the jelly to start to move posteriorly, which is what is a herniated disc. And then you get sciatica and pain down the leg and your toes are numb. And next thing you know, you're in a PT's office or you're going for back surgery or getting an epidural. Don't start none, won't be none. You got to be aware of how you're sitting, whether it's reminding yourself. I mean, they make these cute little things now that you actually can attach or like a necklace to the back of your neck, and when you start to slouch, it'll buzz. Personally, I think it's a waste of money, but if that's what it takes to do, you just have to be aware of how you're moving in space. I mean, we call it ergonomics. 90, 90, 90. You should have a 90-degree angle before everything. You know, the people who have a people who have a computer of the keyboard that are too high or too low, when your wrist is not in a neutral position, you're just setting yourself up for carpal tunnel. And it's just so important. I mean, take a picture of yourself. Set up your iPhone, your Android. What do I look like when I'm working? Because now that we're working from home for, I don't know, 8 hours a day, the problems start to rack up. And you're just sitting there and you're just slouching and you're leaning forward and you're leaning on your hand. And then your neck is sore. Then your back hurts. Then your toes are numb. You just got to be aware of that stuff.
Yeah, wow. You gotta. I think tomorrow I'm actually gonna record myself working, just so I can see what I look like when I'm working.
Some people don't know. I don't love taking my phone out and recording somebody, but sometimes I will do it just to prove a point of, wow, that's how I look right now from the side. And it's hard to stay, perched up all nice, sitting on your tush and your bones. But you start to see that slouching thing. And I mean, I see my friends do it all the time. And just being a PT, I'll walk over and I'll kind of push their lower back and their chest at the same time and sit them up straight. I'm like, I'm a physical therapist. Your posture's killing me. Like, I can't watch you. I can't do this.
So I take it that you're a big fan of standing desks.
Being a physical therapist, I'm always moving and I don't really get a chance to sit down and do a lot of stuff. I would say standing desks should be maybe added into the repertoire. I don't think all or none is the way to go, kind of like how we started this conversation. I think you should have a desk that you stand. I mean, I think you should be standing up for part of the day. I've developed, after being a therapist for 12 years, I don't know how to sit. For me, torture is being put in a meeting for an hour or 2 hours, and when we have to do continuing education, I can't sit still for that long because I'm always up and moving. For anybody that does have a desk job, I would just say get up, walk around, move around, do something. If you have a standing desk for a little bit, that would be a good thing. But then you have to worry, where is your computer at that level? Because if your standing desk is yay high and your neck is leaning forward, next thing you know, you're going to start developing pain between your shoulder blades, which, that can also be, your chest gets tight. Your body is very dynamic, and I'm going to tell you the secret right now to keeping your body healthy, okay? You can't tell anybody.
Oh, okay.
If you keep the tight muscles loose and you strengthen the loose muscles, your body will be much better. It's basic stuff. You get tight pecs in your chest, you get the rounded shoulders, the forward head posture. So what do you have to do? Stretch the muscles that are tight and strengthen the ones that are weak. And everybody gets better. I mean, that really is my secret to physical therapy.
You heard it here first, folks. We got the secrets. But yeah, I do love that. For me, I bring like a blender bottle. I don't bring like a gallon one, simply because I go through water so fast. So if I drink all of it, I go to the farthest water fountain. We fill it there, so I can get like a mini walk-in. It helps a lot with me.
Water's important too. 8 cups a day.
8 cups. Is that near a gallon? 8 cups. That's like 16. Yeah.
64. Yeah, no. That's exactly what it is. That's where that number comes from.
Where can my listeners find you at?
Absolutely. Well, so I host my own podcast. It's more of a storytelling, comedy-based thing. It's usually around 30 minutes. It's meant to be for a short car ride. It's meant to be for a short walk. We generally just crack a beer, we tell some funny stories back and forth, and then we always play a short little trivia at the end. And each episode, we have a different theme. The name of the podcast is Booze Your Daddy. BOO apostrophe S YOURDADDY, the podcast. And it's just meant to be like a play on word because we usually have a beer, and then it's meant to be like, who's your daddy? But honestly, it's sometimes we interview people, sometimes I have a co-host, sometimes we do live stuff, but we're on everywhere. It's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We have a TikTok, an Instagram, YouTube Live. It's really just meant to spread a little more joy, kind of what we were talking before. That's pretty much the gist of it. Most people listen to it, they're like, this is cute, the episodes are fun, but it's really never longer than about a half hour.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Alan, for joining me on this podcast. I had a real fun time with you. Thanks for coming and telling us more about physical therapy and how we can stay healthy.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. Hopefully people learned something. Hopefully people got a laugh in there somewhere.
I hope so too. Thanks so much. Alright, and that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this show of The More You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It'll certainly help me out in the algorithm, and be sure to subscribe or follow to The More You Know on your favorite podcasting platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And lastly, if you would like to contribute to The More You Know, you can head over to anchor.fm/The More You Know Pod and contribute any monetary value to help the quality of the show, and in the future bring on some more interesting guests. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of my listeners, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.